streaming it all day. They just don't turn it
thanks.
off.
Thanks,
So-
appreciate it. That's
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And our last panelist, I think, must have run to the restroom. So we'll get started. So welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Kapczynski. I'm going to be your moderator today. The topic today centers around brand partnerships across sports and celebrities and media, and how everything sort of comes together and works together. We have a great panel to discuss this. They're all ready to go. They're all fired up. And so what we're going to do is we'll ask each of them to kind of talk a little bit about themselves, give their background. We're going to cover off on like some case studies first on some of the projects that they've worked on. Then we'll get into an interactive dialogue throughout the session. We'll try to save some time at the end for questions that you may have. So if you have a question, just flag me, and then we'll get to those at the end of the session. And then we'll wrap up, and then I think they have drinks or reception afterwards. And so what I'd like to actually ask each of you to do is give a little bit of your background and bio and tell us a little bit about you and your company, and then we'll kind of get things going. So Brian, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
I hate talking, so this is going to be difficult for me.
Wait, that's what your whole team said.
Yeah, it's Brian Kelly, SVP of Sales at Bleacher Report. I've been with Bleacher Report for, 10 years now. I was the first salesperson on the West Coast, working alongside a number of different advertising partners. Previously, before that, I worked at CBSSports.com, running West Coast sales. Before that, I was at an advertising agency for a couple of years, so working with brands like Unilever and Burger King and investing their traditional TV dollars across the sports and primetime landscape. And it's been a fun run for the last 18 years being in this business. Bleacher Report's obviously been my home for the last decade or so. We're really kind of at that intersection of sports and culture. A big thing for us this year is our emphasis on our app. So I'm not sure how many of you folks in the audience outside that first row, that's my team there, has the app.
Wait, I want to know how many people in the first row have their app.
Yeah, they better all have the app.
All the hands better go up, right?
So a big push this year is really turning our app into a hybrid of a platform and a publisher. So we want to be that destination for millennial males to go consume their favorite sports content. So the same way Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are delivering content experiences to their fans and their users, we want to do that from a sports standpoint. So imagine watching an NBA game on the Bleacher Report app. Ability to kind of communicate and talk to your friends and build that sense of community has really been a big focus of ours. We've done extremely well across the social sphere over the last 2.5 years. So you look at any of the social platforms themselves, Bleacher Report consistently from an engagement standpoint is always top 5, and that's a great position for us to be in. But the fact that we don't own Facebook or we don't own Instagram, we don't own Twitter, it's a position that you can be vulnerable as a publisher. So for our ability for us to go out and build our owned and operated in our app is an important initiative for us, where we can control the first party data, control their user experience. So being able to offer brands and partners and our fans the hybrid approach of social and O&O has been a really advantageous position for Bleacher Report over the last several years, and we'll continue to kind of push that moving forward.
Great. And just one quick thing, you also mentioned that you were getting into events as well. Do you want to just quickly comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think in this day and age as a publisher, if you're not, reinventing yourself today, you're falling behind tomorrow. And we've done a really good job as a brand from an advertising standpoint in monetizing our content. But for us, we want to look to diversify our revenue streams in other areas. So for the last, 12 months or so, we've been diving deep into e-com and merch and licensing, but also events, to your point, Mark, where we can identify these moments in the sports calendar, where we can go and give fans an experience where they can touch and feel in product and engage with our community, but also use the leverage of our social graph to capture that content and amplify it out across millions of consumers that engage with us each day. So we have about 5 or 6 staples that we look to activate each year. NBA All-Star is a big one for us, NBA Summer League. We've built our own sneaker culture event in New York City in December. So events for us is a big opportunity for us to engage with fans and consumers and brands in a unique way that's not necessarily always tied to advertising.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Anne-Marie, you want to go next?
Hi. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Mark. My name's Marie ONeill. I'm COO of Whale Rock Industries. Whale Rock has been around for about 10 years. My background personally is that I came up through publishing on the creative side, worked in the magazine world for a really long time, flipped over to digital media, and then into video, and then I'm showing how old I am now, and then kind of over to the business side, running the business itself. So Whale Rock over the past 10 years has produced about 20 plus different media properties, most of which were produced in partnership with brands, and some of which were ad supported by brands. So we've worked with brands in those kinds of ways. We also have always had a TV studio. The DNA of the company is really in entertainment, so we've always had a small kind of TV studio operation. And I think as we talk a little further down the hour around the evolution of the relationship between media and brands, I think what Whale Rock has done over the last 10 years, and particularly the last couple of years, is probably going to be able to address that quite a bit, because we've pivoted several times. As the industry, as we all know, has changed drastically over the last few years. So whereas we were in business with brands, developing digital properties with them, we are now in the business of TV, where we're really doubling down on unscripted and scripted development, because that's where the market is right now for the kind of work we do. And we're also looking at ways brands, if we can retain rights in that long-form space, ways brands can integrate into that long-form content. On the other side of the business, we're taking everything we've learned by producing all of the properties that we've produced over the years for and with brands, and we're running a consulting and advisory business where we're working with brands, not just telling them how to do it themselves, but actually starting to do it themselves, as more and more brands are taking their business in-house and trying to build out their own content brands themselves. So
Terrific. Well, welcome. Thank you.
thank you.
Ashley, do you want to go next?
Sure.
Tell us about food.
All food. I'm here to represent all food media.
Excellent.
No. Hi, I'm Ashley McCollum, and I'm general manager of Tasty at BuzzFeed. Sometimes I do this parlor trick, which I'm not sure how it's going to work today, but how many of you know Tasty in the room? Okay, pretty good. All right, I'll take it. Welcome. I feel like I should. Okay. So I've been at BuzzFeed for 7 years, and like both of the previous panelists talked about, is obviously the industry's changed a lot, and BuzzFeed has had to pivot as well and adapt. Like Brian said, every publisher is focused on revenue diversification right now. You can't rely on only one stream anymore to make a sustainable business in this market. And I think there's no better example of BuzzFeed's work on revenue diversification than Tasty. We have built, I've been on Tasty for about 3.5 years. The brand is about to have its 4th anniversary, and we've gone from not existing 40 years ago to quickly just being a Facebook page to 4 years later being a massive business, very meaningful business to BuzzFeed, and that business is incredibly diverse. So still primarily advertising based, but increasingly we have a long line of consumer products. So we have about 120 SKUs of kitchenware at Walmart. We just launched an ice cream line with Nestle. We just launched a spice kit with McCormick, and we'll announce about 15 more partnerships the rest of the year. So that's just one of our businesses. So we've been able to build a really diverse consumer business with our advertising business. Another thing you guys talked about too, which I just want to add on to, is the idea of how difficult it is to build a business on top of the social platforms. Kind of used to be this thing that we would say, and everyone was like, nodded their head. They weren't sure, and everyone's like, yes, definitely now. So the tide has kind of changed. And actually, our position, we still, BuzzFeed and Tasty have built a big part of our scale and a huge part of our market pitch on these social platforms. But I do think that overall we are starting to evolve and starting to understand that what BuzzFeed and what Tasty can do for a client is actually not what Facebook and Google can do. Our pitch has to be, we have to be able to do what uniquely the platforms can't do for you. And in many cases, that is combining these big deals, which I was literally negotiating as we were walking on stage, with talent, with retail activation, massive social scale, content creation, and distribution. And so there are ways to build scale on the platforms, but also make your market offering, your market pitch, the way you work with clients be something unique that the platforms can't do themselves. So that's all kind of like the ad market and the way, a high level view of the way we're looking at it. I would just say overall, Tasty's an impressive story of how to build a brand in a modern age. To come from 0 to 50% awareness in the United States in just 2 years, actually, we hit 50% awareness, is kind of amazing. And it's not just, that's not me taking credit for that. Frankly, I think there's a lot to learn from the story of Tasty and how it was built and how we could build brands and culture in the future moving forward. And so thank you for having me on the panel today.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. Jesse, you want to go next and tell us about you and your business and how you guys got started as well?
I'm just surprised you sleep at all, so I'm just letting you know.
I sleep very well.
No, that's good. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love Tasty, but and Bleacher Report.
Amen.
My name is Jesse Nunez. I am a former partnership executive for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I currently am the CEO and co-founder of an entity called Popfly XP, which is a digital branding platform for athletes. And what we do is we focus on their brand as not so much as a athlete, but rather as an individual. And so one of the things I learned at the Dodgers was that everybody has a favorite team, but everybody has a favorite player. So we wanted to focus on them as individuals and focus on the idea that authenticity and relevancy are what really driving a lot of the engagement that's really happening right now within social media. We have created a platform whereby the fan can come together with the player on a more one-to-one basis, rather than there's some apps out there, not to denigrate anybody, but they use a hub kind of a platform. We go direct to the consumer and make sure that the athlete is speaking directly to the fan that they have. And we work off the existing fan base so that it's hopefully an engaged fan base that we can offer an interesting marketplace and sort of with its own ecosystem that brings fans, players, and brands all closer together. Again, I was a Dodger executive for 3 years, and prior to that I had my own agency for about 13. And so I've consulted with a lot of different categories and a lot of different sectors. And one of the things I realized is that I was telling Brian, we've both sat on both sides of the table, and a lot of times when you get pitched, or at least what I was seeing was when we were pitching or when we were getting pitched, one of the things that gets sort of missed in the equation is the idea of how you might have all these eyeballs, but how do you have truly engaged eyeballs, right? And folks that are actually going to appreciate what you're offering them, right? Rather than just throwing stuff out there just to see if it sticks on a wall. You want to focus on those engaged fans. So that's sort of the impetus for what we started and what we're currently negotiating with a lot of individuals. And since we're getting streamed, I won't say who. But if you talk to me after, I'll be happy to let you know. But more importantly, it's one of those things that we're bringing to market, something that we feel is I think uniquely positioned to take advantage of, again, the authenticity and the relevancy that people want to see in their experience online.
Terrific. Thanks, Jesse. Welcome. Art, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Well, hi, thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you guys at Digital Hollywood. My name is Art Sims. I own an advertising agency. We work primarily in 360 marketing, full service on the digital side, social media, influencers, print, Primarily, we developed, over the last 20 years, we developed relationships with celebrities such as Spike Lee and a number of other, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. They primarily came to our agency because they want us to create branding strategies for their films, specifically for the market of these particular films. And we think that's very important because a lot of times when you're on the creative side developing your trailers and your sizzles and your social media, it's important that all those components work together cohesively and they develop a return on investment that we track. We just recently worked on Black Panther for Disney and Marvel, and so we were on the set. We worked with Chad and worked with the director Ryan Coogler on set with the photographers and developing the strategy for marketing Black Panther. And we're very happy with the results of the film. It did very well. And I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty much it in terms of what my company and what we do. Primarily work in film and television.
Thanks, Art. Welcome. All right, so that's a little bit about the panelists so far. We just wanted to get a quick show of hands for like who's here in the audience. So like if you're at like a type of agency, whether an ad agency or a creative agency, any agency folks, a little bit. Brands, any brands here? A little bit, okay. Publishers, front row. Hands? All right. Folks that are from the creative community in general, Hollywood entertainment, there you go. And last, any startups? Any folks from startups? Okay, so hopefully that helps give you a sense of who's here. So what I'd ask the panelists to prepare like for this kind of next little portion is talk about one project that you can think of as part of your company's efforts lately and working with brands and media companies and pulling these solutions together. And talk about like one, if you can name the brands and so on. Talk about, what was the project, what were the goals, what was the, if there's a return on investment, or what did people get out of it, maybe both on the consumer side as well as on the brand or media property, or Jesse, in your case, the sports side as well. So, Brian, I'm going to pick on you first again. So, you want to tell us a little bit about one of your most favorite projects as of late?
Yeah, so one of our most recent projects is we worked with Hugo Boss. So for the last 2 years or so, I guess, we've done a really good job at Bleacher in terms of not just working with the super endemic sports brands that you would traditionally think that we work with, the Gatorades, the Nikes, the Under Armours, et cetera, but how can we go out and really connect with, or help brands connect with this younger generation? So Hugo Boss challenged us, where their average customer is 51 years of age, and they wanted to connect with a younger demographic. So they were coming out with a new stretch tailored suit, and they kind of approached Bleacher Report to help create a content series where we can go out and film content with an athlete, publish it across our different channels. So through a creative brainstorm, we worked with D'Angelo Russell. So a lot of these up and coming athletes, whether it's D'Angelo or it's someone in the NFL or MLB, a lot of these athletes like to leverage the Bleacher Report platform to grow their brand, because in today's day and age, these athletes themselves, 98% of their time is actually spent off the court or off the gridiron or off the soccer field, and 2% is spent on playing the sport. The other 90% is off the court, where they're listening to music.
You said it right.
Okay, make sure you got it right. So we worked with D'Angelo Russell, who's a big fan of ours, and we created a number of different pieces of content. So for Instagram specifically, which is very different than the way Facebook content is portrayed, was very much UGC. So we created a very UGC style piece of content with D'Angelo Russell around this content series called Get Into My City. And he was filmed actually just doing a pickup game with random kids in a high school. And it was, again, filmed very UGC. Then we created another more polished piece of content that was pushed out across Facebook. So the Instagram post piece of content was actually the #1 branded content post in the history of Instagram. And it was obviously #1 across Bleacher Report. So again, they challenged us to help them connect with this younger demographic, a non-traditional, less endemic type of brand that we've worked with in the past. And it was one of our most successful campaigns that we can kind of show that we can extend beyond just the endemics and leverage Instagram and Facebook to tell creative stories.
Were there any, like, either unique elements of Hugo Boss that you integrated into the content and so on? Like, how did, or were they just kind of the sponsor of it, or did you do some other interesting ties?
Yeah, so D'Angelo was actually wearing one of the custom tailored suits.
He was wearing the suits.
And the whole premise was around the suit was, functionality and comfort. So, he can go play a basketball game in this comfort suit and challenge a number of high school kids at a gym. Taking kind of their thematic and woven it into the content experience was the overall message that we sent out.
Awesome, great. And then what do the brands see as any kind of ROI, or what it was like? Well, how did they view it? Was it just they got enough views on it?
Yeah, their KPI was generating awareness.
Got it.
So we measured views and kind of engagements, and then we also ran a brand study with them as well to show a little bit more purchase intent, ad recall, et cetera.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Anne-Marie, you want to tell us one of your favorite projects?
Sure.
Thanks, Brian.
I'll talk a little bit about we interact a little differently with brands, and over the years have done so differently as well. But just to kind of narrow in a little closer to what people in the room might be doing. Some of the ways we've worked with brands in the past have been to create a big kind of media property that allows the brand to express themselves in a way that is talking to consumers just like a regular publisher would talk to consumers. So it has been sort of a branded content play without the brand being heavily integrated. So one example was we created for Procter & Gamble a site called mum.me, which we actually sold last year. So we created that because they were looking for a way to address mom's audience, which is obviously their biggest audience, and their biggest consumer, in a way that was different from what their own P&G branded platforms were doing, which was very, was brand safe to the extreme, didn't have much humor to it, was very kind of vanilla. So we created a brand for them on which was editorially independent, on which they were able to advertise in a brand safe environment, but which was having a much deeper connection to mums. And the results were that, we grew a very, very large audience. We wound up having a variety of advertisers on the site that were not limited to Procter & Gamble. And then we kind of repeated that type of business for other brands like AARP, which came to us and was looking for a way to, probably the best way to express it would be to talk to a new generation of 50 plus people who don't get their AARP card in the mail and grin. They get their AARP card in the mail and tear it up. So they were trying to find a new way to talk to that audience, and we created a really successful social brand called Purple Clover, which was, again, in partnership with AARP, but not exclusive to AARP. So it took in all kinds of different advertisers for that sector. In the space of 2 years, and this was back in the day where you could build an organic Facebook audience really quickly, in the space of 2 years, that built an audience of 8.5 million organically with no paid over 2 years, and basically took out the competition. It was bigger than Rolling Stone and The New Yorker and other brands that were trying to talk to that audience. So I just think the way we tend to operate, and there are more recent examples, but they're less brand and more media companies that we're helping out. It's a different way to approach a brand, in the sense that rather than looking at branded content, you're saying to the brand, how can you be a content provider in this new age in which every brand really wants to be a content provider themselves? And how can you speak authentically with an authentic voice to grow an audience for yourself via a media property that makes sense for them, your consumer?
In the last example, did AARP also look at any metrics around like new subscribers?
Absolutely. And so really, because it was more of a top of funnel marketing vehicle, we were that site was driving millions and millions of viewers directly to their sign up page. what happened on their sign-up page was their responsibility, but just in terms of that marketing drive. And that was kind of the beginning of our company getting into more of a social marketing role, where then we started working with the Kardashian-Jenners to create their apps and find a way for them to find a direct consumer audience, which they were then able to leverage for selling products, selling subscriptions, etc. So that's another example of how we've worked kind of in a large way with a celebrity or brand too.
Just one more quick
difference.
follow-up on that one, just because if I did interesting. Did you also add any paid media to that, or was it just purely
To which
organic?
one?
For
The ARP?
Yeah.
We were purely organic. We did not end up paying for that.
Got
Yeah.
it. Awesome. Terrific. Thank you for that. Ashley, do you want to tell us about one of your projects? You have some cool ones. You should have brought like food samples with all the different things that you guys have. So
That's the
You're
real
making us
part
all
of the
hungry
trick,
talking about,
is to play a tasty video and then like hand out the pizza.
Yeah,
I don't have that today. But I did notice we're losing some people. I'm wondering if we should say some more provocative things. So should I? No. I don't have anything that provocative. I think I'll talk about a recent example, which I think is a good example to talk about how I said that I think we at BuzzFeed need to be offering an advertiser something that the social networks can't. And so a good one is actually, funny enough, social network. It was Google Home, the hardware division of Google, so it's not exactly the same. But Google Home came to us and challenged us. They said they wanted Tasty to be the premier food partner for their new device that was going to have a screen. And so the idea is that the reason why you use these smart home devices is often to make your life easier. One of the most natural places you want to make your life easier is the kitchen. It's when you're cooking. And when you think of visual media of food, one might think of Tasty. So it was kind of like the most obvious partnership that we could do. But we really decided that the only way that we could do a real strategic partnership with Google Home is if we were really integrated into that experience. We could do media, we could do some content to promote the product, but like the true way we could be fully integrated and do a big deal is if we went all in. So we actually built up a tech team, and that tech team partnered with the Google tech team, and we built a fully optimized app for that experience. It's not the same as like we already have an iOS and Android app. We couldn't just like reskin that app and put it on this new page. It was like totally new tech development, totally new system to build. So that was like a huge investment, obviously. And for us, it would have to be a meaningful partnership in order to do that. Any publisher here would be like, oh my God, you built a tech team for like that's crazy. It was crazy, but so that was kind of the first step. Then we built a lot of content and media around the partnership. We were able to bring our Tasty talent into the mix, and so they were able to show. They wanted to show its bilingual ability. So one of our chefs is in San Diego, grew up in Mexico. Chef Claudette Zepeda Wilkins, and she was able to be in some of the videos to show some of that functionality. We had several other chefs as well. So that was cool. So if we just integrated into their platform, that would be great. If we made content and integrated with our talent, that would be awesome. I think the real moment that made this a big strategic partnership that felt like the future of these kind of big strategic deals for us was actually what we ended up doing is for Black Friday in Q4, we were able to integrate the Google Home into the Tasty 11-piece kit. At Walmart, so the kitchenware line. So we are actually totally new, packaging, new shelf space. We partner with Walmart. So the only way that Google would have gotten that shelf space and gotten that additional inventory in Walmart was through this Tasty activation. We sold 30,000 units in 24 hours, wow. Which was our goal. That was to sell out the special edition. I think it was like, a good example of, full funnel, right? We did tech integration, we did top of funnel brand awareness, consideration, and we also literally drove people in store, and did lots of organic media around that. The last thing, which I actually just remembered, was Google Home also had, if you guys remember their ads, later last year, they had a lot of celebrity endorsement deals, and they had a deal with Chrissy Teigen. Chrissy's someone we've always wanted to work with at Tasty, never quite, like, I don't know, we just like never made it happen. And so Google said we have this relationship with Chrissy, and we were like, we would love to have a relationship with Chrissy. And so they were actually able to use some of their spokesperson, like work, pre-negotiated work, and use it in a Tasty video. We got like 10 million organic views in the first 7 days, which is something like Google could have not done itself. And so really, like, we talk about their partnership a lot just because they tapped into like literally every team across BuzzFeed that they could have to get the most bang for their buck.
Awesome. That's a great example. So thank you for that. Jesse, you want to tell us about your project?
Actually, I can, if I may, I can probably refer back to a Dodger project that
Sure.
sort of created, it was sort of the nexus of like working on that project, kind of gave me one of the ways in which we would work with brands, or how I thought brands would gravitate to working with individual athletes. So I was part of the partnership team at the Dodgers, and one of the entities that we work with is Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is a very, very large partner of the Dodgers and many Major League Baseball teams and sports teams. And the challenge was to figure out how to get something different to that Coca-Cola experience. And so one of the things I noticed, I don't know if anyone noticed, but I'm Italian, so that means I was in charge of all the Latino partnerships, Latino engagement at the Dodgers. I'm just kidding. I am from East LA. But one of the things I noticed is Jaime Jarín has been the Dodger announcer in Spanish for 63 years, and no one's really integrated him into a partnership experience. So one of the things that I saw was that folks would come up to the radio booth, take pictures, say hi. There was always, and Jaime is very gracious, and it's always an amazing experience for people. And then I thought to myself, well, they're taking pictures against a blank wall, right? And well, why not brand it? So we branded the radio booth for Coca-Cola, told them, look, here's an amazing opportunity that every time someone takes an Instagram, Facebook, whatever they're going to do, they're going to have that against the Coca-Cola backdrop. The reason why that's important is that MLB charges you a specific amount of money to be an MLB partner and to do digital. So they separate traditional marks and logos and digital IP in a different way. So you'd have to pay extra for that. So Coca-Cola found it interesting because that way they wouldn't have to pay MLB BAM. So it was like, hey, here's a great opportunity for you to do this in a very organic way, right? And in a way that was going to resonate and be authentic and relevant, right? So the challenge was, what else can we do to make it an exciting experience? So we put in the broadcast booth, we had a Coca-Cola fridge set up in there, and so every time somebody would come, we'd hand them a Coca, my radio engineer, God bless him, would hand them a Coca-Cola can or bottle, and they would take a picture with Jaime, and and again, in a very authentic way, right? It wasn't like, product placement, and we're asking you to do a Coca-Cola pitch or whatever. It was totally organic.
You just told them to hold a
I just
Coke.
No. Can you please make sure it says your name on the Coke? So it got to a point that the other broadcasters would know that there's Coca-Cola in the booth,
Yeah.
so they would come over and get Coca-Cola. So now what was supposed to be just a local LA regional thing was starting to get play in like Cincinnati. And any team that plays the Dodgers, they would come in and start mooching the Coke.
Nice.
So that was, and then so our engineer. Again, God bless him, Efren, you're beautiful people. He would cajole them into taking pictures with Jaime and taking pictures against the booth. So now they're posting pictures with Jaime, and now they're using that. And so again, it triggered in my head that you can create these organic kind of experiences to a brand that is used to paying a lot of money for these kind of experiences, right? And so I said, hey, there's an opportunity to bring these fans and in the case of Jaime, he's the announcer, but players and brands together in a unique way. And it doesn't have to always be like this ROI-driven experience. And so at the end of the season, when we finished the project, the woman who was in charge of the region, she said, hey, we've gotten a lot of good play from this thing. We're really excited. We want to expand it. Would you be interested in talking to the folks in San Francisco? And I said, hey, man, I'm from LA. I don't talk to anybody from San Francisco because those are the Giants, and the Giants suck. And so it was one of those things. And by the way, any Giants fans out there, I apologize in advance. I'm sorry. But when you're a Dodger, the Giants suck. But anyway, so it was interesting because they found it resonated, and it was something that kind of gave me this idea that, you know what, we don't have to have a traditional sort of a platform for them. It's actually something that feels much more relevant to the audience when it's authentic, you know.
So, question for you. So has the MLB shut that down now?
Yes, it
to
has.
take their to take their vig out of it?
Yes, it has. Yes.
So you can only get away with it. For
One of
so
the
long.
funniest experiences was a Dodger executive told me, "How are you having a Coke machine in the broadcast booth?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "It's got to make a lot of noise." And I said, "Well, there's only 3 walls in the booth. The noise comes from the audience, you know, everybody, all the fans, right?" And I said, "I don't think they're going to really care about the the noise from the fridge." He goes, "I just think it looks. We got to get that out of here." And I said, "All right, whatever." So then, like 3 months later, I'm in the broadcast booth and it's still there, and I see him mooching soda out of the fridge. I said, "Hey, I thought you said to get it out of here." Again, I think when it resonates and it's authentic and relevant, you know, I've been a fan of Tasty since it was on Facebook, right? So that was, you know, one of those things that you remember those things. I was sharing with Brian. Right underneath my weather app sits the Bleacher Report app, right? Those are things that, because they feel authentic to you and because they feel and they're relevant, then that makes you more engaged. And that's kind of, you know, again, sort of what resonated for me and why we went on to found the company that we're working on right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it. Art, you want to wrap us up here with your case study on one of your interesting projects, and then we'll kind of dive into some Q&A.
Okay, good. I think I'll just refer back to Black Panther. That was a wonderful experience. My relationship with Chad and with Ryan was excellent. How we started working was working with the Disney and Marvel marketing team. We had numbers of meetings with them, read their script. What was important on Black Panther was that we reached all the lovers of the Marvel characters and loved superheroes. And what was critical was that we stayed kind of close to what the comic books were. So we did a lot of research on the comics and on the Black Panther comics and over the years, and putting together a strategy that would be acceptable to the Marvel and the Disney team. And once we got that developed, then we started. Primarily, we worked on the print campaign. So we put together different sketches, like around 100 different pencil sketches of what we think the direction was. And I was using the Marvel character look from Jack Kirby and Stan Lee to kind of develop our look for Panther. And then from there, we brought on a photographer, and then that photographer went on the set, and we started to shoot many different looks of him and the cast itself. And then once that's completed, then we completed that, and then we put together a presentation that was used, that we presented to the Disney and Marvel team, you know, which they were happy with. But pretty much so, I think working with the celebrities on this particular project was fun. They were all very interested in the look and the marketing of the film, as well as the Marvel team. So there was not much conflict there at all. So, and then from there, we took some of the content there, and then we developed it into some Instagram and some Facebook strategies as well. And pretty much, so we didn't work on any of the AV work. But at the end of the day, you know, we were very happy with what we created for that film.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so like I've taken a bunch of notes on these different things, and you know, I guess part of my assessment is like a lot of what you're trying to do, and maybe I'm going to pick on you, Ashley, first, and then maybe Brian, is like what you guys were starting to talk about, like feels really hard, and like a lot of work goes into this. So I guess kind of the question is like, how realistic is that to build your business around doing these kind of projects, or are they kind of still treated as special one-offs, or is this really the future of how your digital media businesses have to evolve into this is just normal life now, into doing kind of these bigger, broader brand integrations and so on? So I'm going to pick on you first, Ashley, comment on that.
You know, I think it's a very competitive marketplace in digital media. I mean, I think anyone in this space can agree to that. And it's gotten harder in the last couple years. I think that brands ask more from us than they ever have, and frankly, they should. I think that, in my case, which, we were a brand that, was really launched after people like knew what branded content was. Like early days of BuzzFeed, like no, everyone was like, what is like a sponsored post? Like they didn't understand it. So you had to like educate them on that. Tasty launched, like everybody got it. Like, okay, recipe video, we'll integrate in. And at that time, you could get somebody, you could say, oh, we're going to get you 20 million views. And like, that was enough. Like you got the IO, you won the deal. And that is not, that is not the case anymore. And so I think that when, when it's tougher to be, when there's more pressure on our market, you then have to innovate and make your offering more valuable. Maybe they'll spend with you once, but like, will they renew? Like that, I think that these are questions that we have to ask every time. Do we want to scale up like a tech organization for every deal? Like, no way. That specific partnership made a ton of sense that we do that and added value to Tasty, and we had another place to integrate, to interact with our users, like in their kitchens. Like we didn't have that platform before, so that made sense. Is that the like cornerstone of every business plan? Like, no way. But I think in general, we are having to be a lot more competitive, and that's everything from pricing to being more innovative in what we offer. And I just think that that's like true across the board when you feel pressure for largely markets that are commoditizing.
Got it. Brian, what about you? Like, especially because it feels like there's like a shift in your revenue mix, right? From going from ad sales into these newer types of things, whether it's events or these custom projects and so on. Like, are you seeing like more and more of your revenue shifting to the point where that'll become the core revenue and you'll maybe get out of just base advertising? Or is that not realistic?
Yeah, I think it's baby steps, right? So right now we're skewing in the high 90% from a revenue standpoint advertising. How can we kind of reduce that to 80, 70% where we can diversify into these other revenue streams? Yeah. But to Ashley's point, it's super, super competitive. But for us, like our bread and butter is to able to go out and create content experiences, right? Because you got to remember, we're engaging and we're connecting and talking to millennials and Gen Z, and the way they consume content as a 18, 25, 28-year-old, the way a 45 or 50-year-old consumes content is very, very different. An older generation is used to seeing a 15 or 30-second ad in between their content experience, whereas a millennial, they're watching Netflix or they're not embracing ad-supported Hulu.
Right.
So for us, it's like, how can we go out and create these content experiences that's not going to interrupt the flow, that's going to be very organic to our tone of voice of Bleacher Report. And that's going to be to continue the way that we strategize. That's our go-to-market strategy. We're also working internally on building a kind of a creative agency, right? So we can go to brands and leverage all of our first-party data, our knowledge of millennial and Gen Z and the way they consume sports content, and go to brands and be part of their marketing strategy and they're part of their ideation, where we can sit at the table and help them when they're coming up with their marketing plans, versus just being a publisher that receives an RFP just like 100 other publishers out in the space. So it's how can we kind of get creative in that regard, but ultimately kind of all tying back to our bread and butter, which is creating really engaging content experiences for our fans.
Okay, cool. Emery, do you want to kind of comment on this? Because you guys had a bunch of properties and now you don't have as many. So, was this shift part of how you had to change your business and so on?
Yeah, I mean, the motivation was twofold for us. One was that we had, fortunately started to really pick up on the entertainment side of the business and wound up having shows. We've got a big show coming out this summer called Hyperdrive on Netflix, which is the biggest unscripted show Netflix has ever done. And, we started to kind of really double down in that space, and at the same time looked at what was happening in the industry and realized that, if you have a smattering of smaller brands, then you're really, everyone's finding it hard to compete with Facebook and Google and Amazon, obviously. But if you have a smattering of smaller brands rather than one or two really big brands, then you are really behind the eight ball. And so absolutely, we basically took that experience and said, okay, let's shift. Let's take the experience we've had in this model and leverage it in a different way. And so the approach on the non-TV side of the business is more on the creative agency type of work, in which we're leveraging the experience we've had, and have a couple of really large clients who want to learn how to do what we have done, and we're able to apply it there.
Got it. How do you see, maybe Jesse first, I mean, you and I talked briefly about building brands around, players and athletes and so on. Can you kind of comment on what you're having to do in the construct there to build a brand for your, in essence, I guess, clients in that case, the athletes?
I think it's, well, one of the things we're looking at is not looking at them as clients, but rather as partners. So when our experience with the athlete is that typically it's a highly motivated, very competitive individual, and to provide them a gateway into a marketplace that we think is of value to them. One of the things is that they're very eager to learn. Now, there's a difference in athletes. Right now, it's an interesting shift in that you have athletes who are, at the tail end of they're millennials, but then you have, in Major League Baseball or in basketball example, you've got, kids that are 18, 19 years old going into these leagues. And so one of the things that we found is that it's almost the opposite of what you might assume, that these are kids that don't know anything. No, these are kids that are coming in with the sense of brand already firmly embedded. And that's a radical departure from, say, a 36-year-old major leaguer who had to deal with, the gruff, guy who told him, hey man, that's a bunch of bullshit that you're trying to do a brand. What are you talking about? No, these are now the clubhouses are filled and the locker rooms are filled with people who understand that, the brand concept is not, some kind of an evil thing, that it's radically inherent as to who you should be and how you monetize beyond this length of time. Average length of service in Major League Baseball is 6 years. 40% of Major League rosters this year are guys playing at league minimum. That's $500,000 a year, right? Or thereabouts, $550,000. So, and if you look at median income, it's $1 million. It's 1.2, 1.3. So what's interesting there is that what are you going to do with the next 45 years of your life once that career ends? Are you going to, rest on the $33,000 average that you're going to get? Because you're an athlete, so you're probably going to live longer than me. I'm just saying I'm not an athlete. And so, it's one of those things. It's like, oh, have you guys thought about that, right? So this is the thought process. That conversation is the process you have to a 36-year-old, to a 22-year-old. If you're like Hunter Green, who, who's a machine, that guy's already got a sense of brand. Zion has a sense of brand. And these are 18, 19-year-old kids. So it's the conversation there is a little bit different. So for us, it's more about figuring out how to facilitate it for that particular athlete, and that's what we're seeing as we're getting into this. Is that it isn't? I learned a lot by being really quiet inside of a major league clubhouse and sitting in the equipment manager's office and hearing all the conversations and all the different things. But the vast difference between the different demo groups is fascinating, right? And you almost have to address each one on an individual basis, and that's what we're trying to do, because we see that the audience doesn't have to be big, but if it's got a high level of engagement, then that's something that we can monetize for the player and present to a brand who's going to want to speak to that super highly engaged audience.
Art, you work with media companies as brands. How have those evolved over the years, kind of as you've seen the change from traditional media into social media and so on? Can you kind of comment on how you've seen the media property as a brand have to evolve now?
Yes, as I think what's happening is everything has moved into a influencer digital experience. So that's changed in the last 3 years. And so what's happening primarily now is most of our strategies are going mostly to our social media and going to our Facebook, Twitters, and Instagrams, and I think that's probably one of the strongest areas. And it changed because from the millennial standpoint, it just became a demand from those particular consumers, and so it was a demand that was made to the media companies. It was a choice they had to make. So, but yeah, it has changed over the last 3 years. It's changed completely over to a digital side.
Terrific. So Ashley, coming to you on the brand front, is it different now working with brands and helping them build their brand like, I guess, and kind of where my question was coming from was like listening to like Jesse have to talk about like, building an 18-year-old's brand and like all the things and challenges that go into that. Like, how are you seeing that with sort of the traditional legacy brands as well as even like digital native brands that you work with?
Yeah, our perspective is that brand management for years and brand marketing for years was about control, and it was about controlling the message, controlling the aesthetic, and broadcasting that controlled message and aesthetic to an audience. And then in the early days of digital and social, it was still that same perspective, which is control of the image and the message, but just broadcast it on a different platform, which is like Instagram or Google or Facebook, wherever you are. And our perspective is a little different at BuzzFeed. We believe that as a result of the internet, essentially the relationship between whether it's the brand, whether it's the media company, and the audience has fundamentally changed, and that you are no longer in control. You are no longer the authority figure that the audience used to have with brands. So in the past, there were like, 3 laundry detergent brands, right? Like you had a choice, 15 years ago of like, you went to the store, there were 3 that you could choose from. You probably saw some marketing messages that helped you, decide that. To make that choice, maybe price was a choice, a reason why you made a choice. And now, essentially, prices have all dropped across the board because that's where, in consumer packaged goods, if you search laundry detergent on Amazon, you get 10,000 results. So now, there's no such thing as scarcity. The customer has all the control. They can decide what they choose, and and they get to really, they have the keys. And so BuzzFeed's perspective is in launching brands is not one of a top-down authoritative, approach, but the assumption that the audience has the keys, the audience has the control, and our job is just to weave and bob as the audience tells us what to do. So the practical example of that would be, Tasty is a good one, in that we didn't sit in a boardroom and say we want to build a next great food brand. That was not the way it happened. Honestly, it was an experiment to figure out Facebook video, and the experiment went well, and then we we took it to the next level, and then we were people love these crazy pizza bomb videos and like crazy cheese pulls, and so we did more of those. And then one day an intrepid producer was I want to do just potato wedges, and we're it'll fail, it'll never work, it's not cheesy enough. And turns out people actually just wanted recipes to make for their dinner that night. And so we kind of adjusted, and we were oh my God, we could make salad recipes, we could do 5 ingredient recipes. And so basically I think our job was just to spend every ounce of energy we had listening to the customer and adjusting our content offering, our product offering, our advertising offering based off of that. And so if at minimum you see social as a listening tool to understand your customer, that is how we see the internet, and how the internet has fundamentally changed the relationship between the brand and the customer or the audience.
Anne Marie or Brian, do you guys want to comment on that as well? How's the relationship with brands evolved and changed for you guys as of late?
I think that was really smart. That really summed it up, because I think that was a good kind of potted history of the relationship from consumer to brand. But I think you're right, and I think the way brands are now taking it to the next level is to almost want to eradicate the fact that they are a brand, right? They want to be media brands just like BuzzFeed. They want to be seen as cool, and it's very much about brand affinity now. To make the choice from the 10,000 laundry detergents, you might pick up one that appeals to you because of its color. I literally did this in Target yesterday. I picked up a lady shaver because I liked the color, and I cannot even tell you what brand it was, but it was packaged so well and in such a modern way and in such a non mass market way that I walked down the aisle, I saw it and grabbed it and bought it, it was probably twice the price of the Schick or whatever else was on the shelf. But that is how brands are now appealing to customers. It's an Instagram generation, and that's what works.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm shopping for a car right now, and I currently have a Toyota, and by the way, large advertiser with us, I'm just going for it, I don't care. And I went to the Toyota dealership.
And we love them.
Yeah, they're great. But, like, you know, it's an interesting moment to understand the customer buying experience. Well, actually, I went to Mazda because I like this new CX-5 they have. I don't know if anyone's seen it. But, and the Mazda guy was like, aren't you loyal to Toyota? Like, aren't you loyal because you already have a lease with them? Aren't you loyal to them? I was like, no, I'm loyal to me. Like, I'm loyal to what I need. And like, if what I need is like a lower monthly payment, like if you have that for me, that's how I'm going to make that purchase decision. I think that, like, you know, my dad was a mechanic. Like, he had a Chevrolet like his whole life. Like, there was no question of what car that he would buy. Like, it was a Chevrolet. And I just think that, like, generationally and like culturally, we don't make decisions assuming brand loyalty anymore. And that is not like what we try to even message to partners who come to work with us. Like, you should assume they don't have loyalty to you. They have a loyalty to themselves. And like, this is like the most selfish generation that's like ever existed. Like, you cannot assume that they see an ad from you and all of a sudden they are going to buy from you for 10 years. Like, it just doesn't work that way anymore.
I think, you know, what Anne Marie said was interesting because, you know, I had an agency before I was at the Dodgers, and, you know, even if I created, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 pieces of creative, most of it really bad, most of it really shitty, and I'm just being honest.
And people paid you.
And people paid me, so thank you for all those clients who paid me. I really appreciate it. But the long and short of it is that we took time to make sure the audio was right. We took time to make sure backlighting was good, all the lighting was good. You know, we took time to make sure that it was, you know, I used to love using jibs because it would look really cool. You know, we made an effort to make sure that. And what's interesting with today's content, my kids watch like these videos where there's shitty audio, shitty lighting, there's no editing, and it's fantastic because they really focus on the fact that for them it's authentic and relevant, you know, and that's what really true, you know. So in terms of brand loyalty, my kids don't have any brand loyalty. They're flipping around from different thing to different thing. My kid one of my sons watches I don't know this, again, not to try to get too, but he watches Ninja. He doesn't play any video games, but he just finds Ninja fascinating the way he describes, you know, all of his content, right? And how he's playing the game. I go, you don't even play these games. And he goes, no, but it's fascinating. You know, and again, it's like horrible. He's not even lit well, you know, and it just bugs the crap out of me when there's no backlighting. And, you know, but what's fascinating, and there again, it speaks to authenticity and relevancy, right? That's what's driving, you know, a lot of it. My brother, I have a brother who works in packaging design, so he'd be very happy with your comments as well. But you know, the amount of money they spend just in stuff that doesn't get on the shelves is just extraordinary, right? Because they're testing it and all this stuff. And it's funny, but some of the stuff that I always tell them, just go to, hey, just show me how that thing works, right? The Try Me in the toy aisle is fascinating for kids, right? And that's the one that they go and pick because they're walking around the toy aisle at Target or wherever. Hey, look, and you're like, oh my God, put that out of the cart. But they're trying it, right? And it's something, again, because it speaks to them. And my other son has no loyalty to Mattel or Hasbro or any of those brands. It's just whatever is in, you know, that strikes him in that particular moment because it looked cool. But yeah, it's I think it's important to note how much that is driving more so than anything else. You know, the way the brand experience used to be and the way it is now. You know.
Got it. Brian, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that's the interesting. It's interesting with influencer marketing, right? So I think for us, when we're creating content, I don't necessarily think there's like entirely brand loyalty, but we find that like athletes that we're working with, and if they're endorsing a product through content we're creating, there's a direct correlation. There's a direct ROI. You know, take a look at NASCAR as example. You know, Dale Earnhardt Jr. You know, he's represented by Pepsi. If you're a Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan, you're not drinking Coke product. So I think like the influence and power of like sports athletes is at an all-time high right now. So when we're out and we're working with brands, I think it's very important that the narrative is crafted the right way, where the brand feels very organic and authentic, but it's who is part of that content experience is going to actually have like a direct impact on how it is connected with an audience. So for us, we do a lot with athletes, and the way we choose athletes is dictated and predicated on like their loyalty based on like insights that we have. People think that LeBron James and Steph Curry, who are these massive NBA stars, they actually don't resonate as well with our audience as a Donovan Mitchell, for example, or a Marvin Bagley, who are these up and comers. So it's all part of our process, but it's very important. Like I think influencer marketing and like that brand loyalty, there is something to be said. So I kind of sit on both sides of the fence of this argument or debate.
Interesting point. Do you find that the, I guess, influencers or celebrities or sports figures, they already have these affinities for these brands? Like in your example with Hugo Boss at the beginning, did D'Angelo Russell already wear Hugo Boss, or was this like you actually introduced him to a new brand that he got excited about?
Yeah, he wasn't just like an avid Hugo Boss wearer, but I think our ability to kind of connect him with the Hugo Boss team and kind of get familiar with the brand kind of opened up some doors for him. We worked with JCPenney and Marvin Bagley, and he on JCPenney campaign, and he never thought that he would ever like wear a line from JCPenney, and here we are creating this really great content series with him, and now he's out there, and he wore it to the NBA draft last year. So we'll kind of open up the doors for him to go out and strike brand ambassador deals with brands himself.
Cool. Do you want to add anything to that, or you look like you had a comment there?
No, I was just smiling because we have worked with some of the biggest potential brand ambassadors in the world through their social following with the Kardashian-Jenner sisters, and there was a list. There was a list. On the brand side, it was always interesting to see how a brand reacted to a particular kind of celebrity, and many just wanted to step back or step away. Yeah. But by the same token, they were very, very picky about what they would promote based on their own likes and dislikes, not necessarily the paycheck. And we also work, currently, one of the digital properties we did maintain was tested.com, and Tested, the YouTube channel, which is Adam Savage's channel. He's the former Mythbusters guy. And we're coming out with a TV show of his on Discovery very soon, by the way. That Adam, good plug, right? Because Adam's entire universe is built on this deep and nerd culture in which you get a whiff of something inauthentic shuts you down. He is very, very picky about what he will and will not advertise. So, and it's probably something he already owns.
Jesse, anything else you want to add to that? You're shaking your head there.
No, I'm just agreeing with Anne-Marie. I think it's one of the for us, athletes for the most part aren't the greatest pitchmen, or else they would be in the pitch business and not in the particular sport they're in. Yeah. So one of the things is that what we're going to do is we're focusing on the brands that they use already, and so as to not create, there's that, you made mention of Dale Earnhardt. You're never going to see him with a Coke can, right? So if you saw him with a Coke can, then it would be inauthentic, right? So the same thing with the athletes. We're sitting down and going over with them, hey, what are the brands that you're using? Are you talking to these brands? More often than not, they haven't. So it's one of those things, whether it's the water they're drinking or whatever they're using for hydration. Those are the ideas that, and it will probably be at some cost to us that we maybe are shutting out another opportunity. But the idea is that, again, you're presenting them in an authentic and relevant way, and not to overuse the word, but if you're presenting them with a water that they don't drink, for example, and they're going to kind of look at it kind of weird, right? And it has to be part of their everyday, that, again, I harken back to that Coca-Cola experience, right? It was just part of the background, right? And it's not meant to be this over-the-top thing, because then it's going to feel like,
it's placed there.
It's placed there, right? And then that's not what they're looking for. I'm watching the Tasty videos not because of whatever product they're using, but because I was interested in the recipe, right? A couscous, by the way, was. But again, those are those things that made me want to watch them, right? Cool. And continue to I was going to say on the Bleacher Report thing, I watched the entire NFL draft with Lefko, right? And I found that like totally engaging, because they were trying to one up all of the TV, and they kept referencing that, right? Which I thought was really cool. Oh, TV's at commercial break. We're right here with the pick. And again, that felt like, man, you're talking to me, right? And that was something uniquely different than anything you're going to experience and they had a shitty set. I'm sorry, guys, but the set was not, it's like this.
It was not optimal.
No, it was this. I mean, it was a nice logo, but it was totally, there was all geek, football geekiness,
Yeah.
and so that was the cool part about it, that it felt like, hey, I'm watching it on my phone because I'm running around town and I can't see on TV, and I had a much better experience because it felt more authentic to me, and it felt like they were talking to me, and that's certainly something that you want to never lose sight of.
Jesse's actually a influencer for Ashley and I for Tasty and Bleacher Report.
Thank you, Jesse.
He's on the payroll.
I'm sorry, I don't watch the Kardashians, so forgive me for that. But I do listen to Untitled, the podcast that Adam has.
Oh, yeah?
Spectacular.
Good, there you go. I found one, yeah.
So I do want to ask one question, because I think a few of you touched on it, and I think, Brian, I'm going to pick on you first because you mentioned it, I think, the most, which is, what's the role of data in all of this? So, we obviously talked a lot about ROI and how you come up with these programs and stuff, but how do you use data? I mean, you mentioned collecting it and getting access to it. Like, what's the role of data in all this for you?
Yeah, so from a content creation standpoint, data is super, super important for us because everything that we produce and create and generate from a content standpoint is enriched in data. So our content and editorial folks are not in a back room just throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks, pardon my French. It's all enriched and rooted in data and insights. So we have a team that's scouring the social sphere, scouring just the internet in general to figure out what's resonating with an audience, and we take a lot of those insights and we apply that to the content we're creating from a sports and culture perspective. That's from a content standpoint. From an advertising marketing standpoint, now that we are owned by AT&T, and 2 in 3 Americans have some type of AT&T service, 170 million different touch points. How can we leverage data to help kind of be a full funnel solution for a brand? So we do really well from an upper funnel brand awareness standpoint, but how can we pull fans or users down the funnel for purchase intent and attribution? So again, we can kind of rival the likes of an Amazon and a Facebook and be that nimble because of all the first party data that we can have to leverage. So we're just now starting to implement that into our brand campaigns. It's still very fresh. It took a while to kind of get that pushed through, as everyone's aware. But that's going to be a big part of kind of our strategy moving forward, is talking to brands and saying, we could be a full funnel solution for you because of our ability to tap into all this first party data.
That's awesome. Ashley, what about you guys? Do you guys use a lot of data in how you guys operate and so on across the board?
Yeah, I mean, I think BuzzFeed is pretty well known in the industry as being quite data driven. Like, we started as frankly, more like a data company. It was like there was 20 engineers and 3 writers making weird lists before people knew what that was. We had a BlackBerry optimized website before the iPhone existed. So tech and data are very much in our DNA. And if you know Jonah, our CEO, you know that, or if you've ever worked with him or heard of him, his brain just works differently. He's not your traditional creative. He's not your traditional Hollywood executive. And so I think he's, I've been there 7 years, and he's kind of taught, he and the executives he's hired have taught all of us that data should be really in our blood and every decision we make. But I think people confuse what that means. One time I used to do comms actually for BuzzFeed, and I had this Wall Street Journal editor. He came in and I was walking around. Okay, this is BuzzFeed. He was like, oh, I was like, oh, there's the data scientist. He was like, oh, they're the ones who found the dress. If anyone remembers the dress with the 2 colors, the whole thing. I was like, no, that's not how it works. Actually, they just help build systems and infrastructure so that we can make better decisions. They don't actually find, and so Tasty, the same. It was I was like, oh, maybe that was a one-off. And then Tasty, I'll walk people around, give tours or whatever, and people were like, oh, we're the data scientists. They're they think that they're in a room telling us make more meatballs. That is not.
I heard
it's not the
salad's
case.
big.
Yeah. But so I think like the most practical way to think about how we use data in creative ideation would be it's really good at splitting a tie, right? So if a client comes to us, if we're just talking about client integration work, if a client comes to us and they're like, we don't, we either want to make a vegan Thai recipe or like a spicy Thai recipe with meat, like what, or like they don't really know, or maybe they have a really strong opinion and we kind of disagree with their opinion. You would use data to help you split the tie. So you would say, well, if you look back at all of our vegan content, it actually over-indexes for young women in, like big metropolitan cities, and like your campaign actually wants to do that. And so if it, whatever. So it would help. It doesn't drive creative decisions. I think it helps you split a tie. And that's just on the creative side, obviously. Our proprietary data offerings to, actual data and insights to clients is something quite different. But I think that the shift in 15 years ago to make a creative decision, you didn't think about data. You thought about what you thought was good. You were the arbiter. You were the broker of what was good or what was bad. And now that the internet has enabled the audience to decide what is good or bad, then you have to listen to the audience, and that is best done through data.
Awesome. Jesse, Art, do you guys, what's the role of data in your worlds?
I would agree with what's been said before. I think one of the interesting things, the only thing I would add is that I think if you don't lose track of your mission, I think it's easy to not include, or forgive me, if you lose track of your mission and not include data as part of that mission, I think you're doing yourself a disservice and your partners a disservice. Whether the partners are players or the partners are the brands, those insights, they're trying to maximize that return on investment, whatever way possible. The engagement process that we want to initiate with their fans is certainly something that data is going to help you, deliver that to them, right? And in the best way possible. So analysis on the front end, again, for the most part, these are when you're talking about the athletes, they've never gone through any type of an analysis of who their audience is, who they're speaking to, talking about demos, all those different things that they need to be aware of, because it'll influence the type of content that you bring to the table and bring to market. And so for us, it is without measure and a key thing to what we're doing. Yeah.
Art, what about you? Role of data?
I agree with Jesse. I think that we have our data that we put together for our clients, and the clients have data that's supplied to us, and then we have a communication where we discuss the data and how we're going to create a storytelling experience based on those two data experiences. At the end of the day, the storytelling experience is very critical. I mean, data is important, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, I think you have to have a very powerful storytelling experience, Otherwise, the data becomes very mechanical, and you can, miss your mark. So those are my thoughts.
Awesome. Well, guys, we're actually out of time. We made it through the whole session, so I really appreciate you guys and all your comments and feedback and so on. So, audience, how about a big round of applause for Brian, Anne-Marie, Ashley, Jesse, and Art.